The stars burned bright in the cold darkness of space as the HFY War fleet moved through the galaxy, like death itself. 12 massive ships, each one bigger than a human city, glided silently between worlds. Their black hulls gleamed with strange alien metal that seemed to drink in the light of distant suns. Red energy crackled along their weapon ports, ready to bring destruction to any world that dared to resist. Supreme Commander Zalthis stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the screens that showed their next target. His 4 eyes glowed with satisfaction as he studied the peaceful colony world spinning slowly below them. Green continents and blue oceans made it look almost like the legendary Earth that his scouts had reported about. But this world belonged to the aquatic Murtani people, and soon it would belong to the HFY Dominion. "Begin the assault," Zalthis commanded in his harsh, clicking language. His voice carried the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds. The HFY ships opened fire without warning. Beams of pure energy, hot as the core of a star, lanced down from orbit. They struck the Murtani cities and turned them into glass in seconds. The beautiful coral towers that had taken centuries to grow melted like ice in a furnace. Millions of innocent beings died before they even knew they were under attack. Captain Jake Morrison watched it all happen from his hiding spot behind the system's largest moon. His small reconnaissance ship, the USS Defiant, was built for speed and stealth, not fighting. All he could do was record everything and hope his ship's cameras could capture proof of what the aliens were doing. "Captain," his communications officer whispered, her voice shaking with horror. "The Murtani are trying to surrender. They're broadcasting on all frequencies." Jake clenched his fists as he watched the peaceful fish-like beings raise white flags from their few remaining cities. It didn't matter. The HFY ships kept firing until nothing moved on the planet's surface. In 6 hours, an entire civilization was wiped out. "Take us out of here," Jake ordered quietly. "Maximum stealth. We need to get this information back to Earth Command." As the Defiant slipped away into hyperspace, Jake thought about what he had witnessed. This was the 4th world he had seen the HFY destroy in the past month. First, it was the crystal cities of the Silkari people, their beautiful towers shattering like diamond under the alien weapons. Then came the floating habitats of the Vortek, burning as they fell through their gas giant's atmosphere. After that, the mountain cities of the stone-like Gralnash turned to rubble in minutes. Every species had tried to fight back in their own way. The Silkari had energy shields that could stop most weapons. The Vortek had fast ships that could dance through space like birds. The Gralnash had armor thicker than tank plating. None of it mattered against the HFY fleet. Jake had studied the alien ships during each attack. They were bigger than anything humans had ever built, powered by some kind of fusion reactor that made their own nuclear engines look like toys. Their energy shields could absorb incredible amounts of damage. Their plasma cannons could cut through the strongest known metals. Most terrifying of all was their planet-killer weapon, something the aliens called the World Render. Jake had seen it crack a moon in half during one battle. The trip back to human space took 3 days. During that time, Jake wrote his report over and over, trying to find words that could describe what he had seen. How do you explain to people that death was coming for them? How do you tell an entire species that they might be next? When the Defiant finally reached Earth's outer territories, Jake transmitted his report immediately. Within hours, he was called to appear before the Stellar Defense Command. Admiral Lisa Carter, the highest-ranking officer in Earth's military, sat across from him in a secure briefing room. Her face was grim as she read through his report. "Captain Morrison," she said finally, "how long do we have?" Jake had been dreading this question. "Based on their current course and speed, I estimate they'll reach the Tau Ceti colonies in 2 weeks. After that, Earth is only a month away." Admiral Carter closed her eyes for a moment. Jake knew what she was thinking. Earth's fleet consisted of 23 cruisers and 48 destroyers, all built for fighting human pirates and protecting trade routes. They had never been designed to face an enemy like this. "What about our weapons?" the Admiral asked. "Could our nuclear missiles penetrate their shields?" Jake shook his head. "I watched the Vortek launch everything they had at the lead ship. Nuclear warheads, antimatter bombs, even some kind of quantum torpedo I'd never seen before. The HFY shields absorbed it all without even flickering. And their numbers? 12 dreadnoughts, at least 40 smaller ships, and hundreds of fighter craft. Each dreadnought carries enough firepower to level a continent. Admiral Carter stood up and walked to the window overlooking Earth's orbital shipyards. Construction crews were working around the clock on new ships, but even Jake could see they were all the same basic design as the existing fleet. More of the same weapons that had failed every other species. There is one possibility, the Admiral said slowly. Project Titan has been in development for 15 years. It's our most advanced battleship design, but it's never been tested in combat. Jake had heard rumors about Titan. Some said it was twice the size of a regular cruiser. Others claimed it had experimental weapons that broke the laws of physics. Most people thought it was just a waste of money. Is it ready? Jake asked. Admiral, Carter turned back to him with a look he had never seen before. It was the look of someone who knew they were about to bet everything on a single card. It will have to be, she said. The alarms were screaming across every human colony in the Tau Ceti system. Transport ships filled with terrified families lifted off from planets and space stations, their engines glowing bright against the darkness. Children pressed their faces to windows, watching their homes disappear below them as their parents tried to explain why they had to leave everything behind. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the command center on Earth, watching the evacuation reports scroll across her screens. 2 million people lived in the Tau Ceti colonies. The transport ships could only carry 50,000 at a time, and they needed 6 hours to reach the jump point to safety. The math was simple and terrible. Most of the colonists would still be there when the HFY fleet arrived. Admiral, her aide said quietly, the Titan is ready for deployment. Carter nodded and walked toward the secure elevator that would take her to the classified shipyard. For 15 years, she had watched the Titan grow from blueprints into reality. The project had cost more money than the rest of Earth's fleet combined. Politicians had called it a waste. Military experts had said it would never work. But now it was humanity's only hope. The elevator doors opened to reveal the largest space dock ever built by human hands. And there, floating in the center like a sleeping giant, was the USS Titan. The ship was massive, 5 times longer than Earth's biggest cruiser and twice as wide. Its hull was not the smooth metal of other human ships. Instead, it looked like layers of armor had been welded together, one on top of another, creating a surface that seemed to absorb light. Weapon ports dotted its sides like the eyes of some ancient sea creature. Commander Ryan Hayes stood waiting for her on the dock. He was young for a ship captain, only 35, but he had been part of the Titan project since the beginning. His dark hair was already showing gray from the stress of the past few weeks. Admiral, he said, saluting crisply, the Titan is ready for combat operations. Carter looked up at the enormous ship. Are you sure, Commander? This vessel has never fired a shot in anger. The weapons tests were successful, Hayes replied. Our main guns can punch holes through asteroids. The armor held up against everything we threw at it. The crew has been training on simulators for months. Carter walked toward the ship's boarding ramp. Tell me about your people. Hayes fell into step beside her. Chief Engineer Amy Walsh knows every bolt and wire on this ship. She's been working on the fusion drive system for 8 years. If anyone can keep us running, it's her. They entered the ship through the main airlock. The corridors were wider than those on other human vessels, built to accommodate the Titan's larger crew and equipment. The walls were lined with damage control panels and emergency supplies. Lieutenant Danny Ross is our weapons officer, Hayes continued as they walked. He was a fighter pilot before transferring to gunnery. He understands how weapons work in space better than anyone. They reached the bridge, and Carter was impressed despite herself. The command center was twice the size of a normal ship's bridge, with stations for dozens of crew members. At the center sat the captain's chair, surrounded by screens showing every part of the ship's status. And this is Atlas, Hayes said, pointing to a complex computer terminal. Our tactical computer. It can calculate firing solutions and battle strategies faster than any human. The computer's screen flickered to life, showing a simple face made of green lines. "Good morning, Admiral Carter," it said in a calm, friendly voice. "I have been analyzing the Kethvar fleet composition based on Captain Morrison's reports. Would you like to review my tactical assessment?" Carter stared at the screen. She had heard about artificial intelligence programs, but this was the first time she had spoken to one. "What are our chances, Atlas? Based on current data, the Kethvar fleet possesses superior numbers, energy output, and defensive systems. However, their tactical doctrine appears predictable. They rely on energy shields and plasma weapons exclusively. This creates potential vulnerabilities." "What kind of vulnerabilities?" The screen showed a diagram of a Kethvar ship. "Their energy shields are designed to absorb and redirect energy-based attacks. However, they may be less effective against kinetic projectiles. Our magnetic railguns fire solid tungsten slugs at 12% of light speed. These projectiles carry enormous kinetic energy that cannot be absorbed by energy fields." Hayes nodded. "That's our main advantage. While other species tried to match Kethvar energy weapons, we focused on kinetic systems. Our main batteries can fire projectiles that hit harder than nuclear warheads." Carter walked to the weapons station and examined the controls. They were simpler than she had expected. "How many shots do we have?" "Each main gun can fire continuously for 30 minutes, Lieutenant Ross answered from behind her. Carter turned to see a young man with sharp eyes and steady hands. "We also have secondary batteries, missile launchers, and point defense systems. But our real strength is the armor." He led her to a display showing the ship's cross-section. "Other ships use single-layer hulls with energy shields. We use layered armor plating. Titanium steel composite designed to absorb impact and distribute damage across the entire structure. If something hits us, the energy spreads out instead of concentrating in one spot." Chief Engineer Walsh joined them on the bridge. She was a small woman with oil-stained hands and bright eyes. "Admiral, the fusion reactors are running at full power. We can maintain maximum acceleration for hours without overheating. The magnetic field generators are online and ready to deflect energy weapons." Carter looked around at the crew. These people had spent years preparing for a battle they hoped would never come. Now that moment was here, and they were ready to face an enemy that had destroyed every civilization it encountered. "Commander Hayes," she said formally, "I'm giving you command of the Titan. Your mission is to protect the Tau Ceti evacuation fleet. Buy them time to escape, whatever the cost." Hayes saluted. "Understood, Admiral. We won't let you down." As Carter prepared to leave the ship, she turned back one last time. "Commander, you're facing impossible odds. No one expects you to win this fight." Hayes smiled grimly. "With respect, Admiral, we're not planning to win. We're planning to show the galaxy that humans don't give up. When the Kethvar face us, they'll know they've been in a fight." The USS Titan powered up its engines and moved slowly out of the shipyard. Its massive form blocked out the stars as it accelerated toward the jump point. Behind it, Earth's population watched on their screens, knowing that their survival depended on this single ship and its crew. In the depths of space, the Kethvar fleet continued its advance toward Tau Ceti, confident in their power and expecting another easy victory. They had no idea that humanity was about to introduce them to a completely different kind of warfare. The Kethvar war fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a storm cloud blocking out the sun. 12 massive dreadnoughts led the way, their dark hulls crackling with red energy. Behind them came 40 smaller cruisers and hundreds of fighter craft, all moving in perfect formation. They had done this dance of death so many times that it had become routine. Supreme Commander Zalthus stood on his flagship's bridge, studying the human colony worlds that orbited the yellow star. His four eyes glowed with satisfaction as he counted the civilian transport ships fleeing the system. Fear was a weapon too, and these humans were showing proper terror in the face of Kethvar power. "Scan the system for military vessels," he ordered his tactical officer. The young Kethvar worked at his console for several minutes before looking up in confusion. "Commander, I detect only civilian transports and one military vessel." Zalthus clicked his mandibles in amusement. "One ship? What class?" Unknown, sir. It's much larger than the human vessels we've encountered before, but still smaller than our cruisers. It appears to be hiding behind the fourth planet's moon. The Supreme Commander laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. One ship thinks it can stop the entire Dominion fleet. These humans are even more foolish than the other species we've conquered. Meanwhile, behind Tau Ceti's largest moon, Commander. Ryan Hayes stood on the Titan's bridge watching his tactical displays. The alien fleet was exactly where Captain Morrison had predicted it would be. 12 dreadnoughts, 40 cruisers, and swarms of fighters. On paper, it was impossible odds. All stations report ready, sir, Lieutenant Danny Ross announced from the weapons console. Chief Engineer Amy Walsh's voice came through the communication system from the engine room. Fusion reactors at full power, Commander. All systems green. Hayes nodded and activated the ship-wide communication channel. All hands, this is the captain. In a few minutes, we're going to face an enemy that has destroyed every civilization it's encountered. They think we're just another weak species that will break and run. They're wrong. He paused, looking around at his bridge crew. These people had trained for years for this moment, but training and reality were different things. We're not fighting to win today, Hayes continued. We're fighting to buy time for 2 million innocent people to escape. We're fighting to show the galaxy that humans don't surrender. When this battle is over, every species in the galaxy will know that the Kethvar can be hurt. Hayes closed the channel and turned to his helmsman. Take us out from behind the moon. Full power to the engines. The USS Titan emerged from its hiding place like a mountain rising from the sea. Its massive bulk dwarfed the fleeing transport ships it moved to protect. The ship's armor plating gleamed dully in the light of Tau Ceti's sun, and its weapon ports glowed with barely contained energy. On the Kethvar flagship, alarms began sounding, as sensors detected the human battleship. Zalthus stared at the readings in disbelief. The ship was larger than his scouts had reported, and it was moving directly toward his fleet instead of running away. Sir, his communications officer reported, the human vessel is transmitting a message. Put it on the main screen, Zalthus ordered. Commander Hayes appeared on the display, his face calm and determined. This is the United Earth vessel Titan. You have entered human space and threatened innocent civilians. Withdraw from this system immediately or we will engage. The Supreme Commander's laughter echoed through his bridge. Reply to the human. Tell them they have 1 minute to surrender before we destroy them. Hayes listened to the alien response and smiled grimly. Message received. Our answer is no. He turned to Lieutenant Ross. All weapons prepare to fire. Zalthus decided to make an example of the foolish humans. Launch all fighters. Destroy that ship quickly so we can continue with the conquest. 300 Kethvar fighters streaked away from the main fleet, their sleek forms darting through space like angry wasps. They had destroyed the fighters of every other species with ease. These humans would be no different. But as the alien fighters approached the Titan, something unexpected happened. The massive human ship suddenly bristled with weapons. Hundreds of small turrets emerged from hidden ports all along its hull. Laser beams and flak bursts filled the space around the battleship, creating a wall of destruction that no fighter could penetrate. The first wave of Kethvar fighters flew straight into this defensive screen and were torn apart instantly. Their energy shields, designed to stop other fighters' weapons, were useless against the concentrated firepower of the Titan's point defense grid. Wave after wave of fighters attacked, but none could get close enough to use their weapons. The human ship's defensive systems were like nothing the Kethvar had ever encountered. Instead of a few large weapons, the humans had mounted hundreds of smaller guns that could track and destroy multiple targets simultaneously. Within minutes, half the Kethvar fighter force was debris floating in space. Supreme Commander Zalthus watched in growing anger as his elite pilots died. No species had ever been able to stop his fighters so completely. Order the cruisers to attack, full power to weapons. 20 Kethvar cruisers moved forward, their plasma cannons charging with deadly energy. These weapons had melted through the strongest defenses of every civilization they had encountered. Surely they would be enough to destroy one human ship. The alien cruisers opened fire simultaneously. Beams of superheated plasma, each one hot enough to melt a mountain, struck the Titan's hull. The human ship disappeared in a ball of brilliant energy as the plasma weapons discharged their fury. For a moment, Zalthus thought the battle was over. Then the energy cleared and the Titan was still there. Its armor was scorched and glowing, but the ship was intact and moving forward. "Impossible," the Supreme Commander whispered. On the Titan's bridge, damage reports were coming in from all sections. "Hull temperature rising, but within acceptable limits," Chief Walsh reported. "Armor integrity holding at 85%. Hayes smiled. The aliens' energy weapons were powerful, but the Titan's layered armor had been designed specifically to absorb and distribute that kind of damage. Where other ships had thin hulls protected by energy shields, the Titan was built like an ancient battleship, with thick armor that could take punishment and keep fighting. "Lieutenant Ross," Hayes said calmly. "Return fire. Full salvo." The Titans' main batteries spoke for the first time in anger. 8 massive railguns fired simultaneously, launching tungsten slugs at 12% of light speed. The projectiles crossed the space between the fleets in seconds and struck the leading Kethvar cruisers. The aliens' energy shields, which had stopped every energy weapon ever fired at them, were useless against solid matter traveling at such incredible speed. The tungsten slugs punched through the shields as if they didn't exist and tore completely through the alien ships from bow to stern. 2 Kethvar cruisers exploded instantly. A third began spinning out of control. Its hull cracked open like an egg. The remaining cruisers stopped their advance, their crews staring in shock at weapons that could penetrate their defenses. For the first time in centuries, the Kethvar Dominion had encountered an enemy that could hurt them, and the battle was just beginning. The space around Tau Ceti had become a battlefield unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Wreckage from destroyed Kethvar fighters drifted between the two fleets like metal snow. The alien cruisers that had survived the Titan's first salvo were pulling back, their crews confused and terrified by weapons that could pierce their shields. Supreme Commander Zalthus gripped the arms of his command chair so hard his claws left marks in the metal. In 500 years of conquest, he had never seen his ships damaged like this. The human vessel continued to advance, its scarred hull glowing from plasma impacts but still intact and fighting. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "the remaining cruisers are requesting new orders. They don't know how to fight this enemy." Zalthus hissed in frustration. His forces had always won through superior firepower and technology. No species had ever forced them to change tactics because no species had ever survived long enough to make it necessary. On the Titan's bridge, Commander Hayes watched his crew work with calm efficiency. Damage control teams were sealing hull breaches while the weapons crews reloaded their railguns. Chief Engineer Walsh's voice crackled over the communication system from deep in the ship's engine room. "Commander, we're running hot, but everything's holding together. The armor is doing its job, but we can't take this kind of punishment forever." Lieutenant Danny Ross looked up from his weapons console. "Sir, enemy cruisers are falling back. Should we pursue?" Hayes shook his head. "Negative. Our job is to protect the transports, not chase targets. How many civilian ships are still in the system?" 43 transport vessels, sir. They need another 2 hours to reach the jump point." Atlas, the ship's artificial intelligence, spoke from its console. "Commander, I am detecting movement in the enemy fleet. The dreadnoughts are advancing to attack positions." Hayes felt his stomach tighten. The cruisers had been bad enough, but the dreadnoughts were 3 times larger and carried the most powerful weapons in the Kethvar arsenal. If the Titan could barely handle the cruisers, how could it survive against the flagship? "All hands prepare for heavy combat," Hayes announced over the ship's communication system. "Damage control teams to battle stations. This is going to get rough." The 12 Kethvar dreadnoughts moved forward like a wall of death. Their massive hulls were covered with weapon ports, and energy crackled along their surfaces as they charged their guns. At their center moved the flagship, twice the size of the others and bristling with more firepower than some entire fleets. Supreme Commander Zalthus had decided to end this battle personally. All dreadnoughts concentrate fire on the human vessel, maximum power to weapons. The alien ships opened fire together. Dozens of plasma beams struck the Titan simultaneously, turning the space around it into a miniature sun. The human battleship disappeared completely in the blinding glare of energy weapons discharging their fury. For long seconds the battle paused as both sides waited to see the result. Then the energy cleared, and the Titan emerged from the plasma storm. Its armor was glowing white-hot in places, and sections of its hull were twisted and melted, but the ship was still moving forward. Chief Walsh's voice came through the communication system, strained but determined. Hull temperature critical in sections 7 through 12. Automatic systems are venting atmosphere to cool the armor. We're holding together, but just barely. Hayes looked at his tactical display. The Titan had taken more damage in those few seconds than in the entire previous battle, but it was still fighting. The ship's layered armor was doing exactly what it had been designed to do, spreading the enormous energy across the entire hull instead of letting it concentrate in one spot. Lieutenant Ross, return fire. Target the flagship. The Titan's railguns spoke again, sending their deadly cargo screaming across space, but this time the dreadnoughts were ready. They had seen what the human kinetic weapons could do, and they began evasive maneuvers as soon as the Titan fired. Most of the tungsten slugs missed their targets, but 2 struck glancing blows on the flagship's hull. The projectiles tore long gashes in the alien ship's armor, sending debris spinning into space. It was the first time in history that the HFY flagship had been damaged in battle. Zalthus felt something he had never experienced before: fear. These humans were not like the other species. They didn't try to copy HFY technology. Instead, they had created something completely different, and it was working. "Sir," his weapons officer reported, "the World Render is charged and ready to fire." The World Render was the HFY's ultimate weapon, designed to crack planets and destroy entire fleets. It had never been used against a single ship before, but desperate times called for desperate measures. "Target the human vessel," Zalthus ordered. "Full power." A section of the flagship's hull opened like a flower, revealing the massive barrel of the World Render. Energy began building inside it, creating a glow that could be seen across the entire star system. This weapon had destroyed moons and shattered asteroids. Surely no ship could survive its power. The World Render fired. A beam of pure destruction, wider than the Titan itself, struck the human battleship dead center. The energy was so intense that it lit up space for millions of kilometers in every direction. For a moment, it seemed as if a new star had been born in the Tau Ceti system. When the light faded, everyone expected to see empty space where the Titan had been. Instead, the human ship was still there, its hull glowing like a piece of metal fresh from a forge. Sections of armor had been vaporized, exposing the ship's internal structure, but the vessel was intact. The silence on the HFY flagship was deafening. Their most powerful weapon, the one that could crack worlds, had failed to destroy a single human ship. Hayes pulled himself up from the bridge floor where the impact had thrown him. Half his crew were unconscious, and smoke was pouring from damaged consoles, but they were alive and the ship was still fighting. "Damage report," he called out weakly. Chief Walsh's voice came through the speakers, but it was different now, harder, angrier. "Commander, they just made it personal. The World Render burned through our outer armor layers, but the inner hull held. We're hurt, but we're not dead." Hayes looked at his tactical display. The World Render would need time to recharge before it could fire again. That gave him one chance to end this fight. "All power to engines," he ordered. "We're going to ram that flagship," Atlas spoke up from its console. "Commander, that action will likely result in the destruction of both vessels." Hayes smiled grimly. "Sometimes, Atlas, that's exactly what you need to do." The Titan's engines flared to maximum power, and the massive battleship began accelerating directly toward the HFY flagship. As it closed the distance, its remaining weapons fired continuously, rail guns and missiles striking the alien ship again and again. The HFY dreadnoughts tried to stop the Titan's charge, but their weapons couldn't penetrate the human ship's remaining armor fast enough. The battleship smashed through their defensive formation like a spear through paper. At the last second, Hayes ordered, "All weapons, point-blank range, fire everything." The Titan's gun spoke one final time, unleashing everything they had left directly into the flagship's hull. Tungsten slugs, missiles, and energy beams tore into the alien ship at close range, ripping through armor and internal systems. The HFY flagship began to break apart, its hull cracking like an egg. Secondary explosions rippled along its length, as weapon magazines and fuel tanks detonated. Supreme Commander Zalthus had just enough time to realize that his 1,000-year reign of terror was ending before his ship exploded around him. The destruction of the flagship sent shockwaves through the remaining HFY fleet. For the first time in their history, they had lost a battle. Their Supreme Commander was dead, their most powerful weapons had failed, and a single human ship had done it all. The surviving alien vessels began to retreat, their crews no longer. Believing in their own invincibility, the age of easy conquest was over. The explosion of the HFY flagship lit up the Tau Ceti system like a second sun. Pieces of the massive alien warship scattered across space, some as large as buildings, others reduced to glowing metal dust. Where Supreme Commander Zalthus had once commanded the most feared fleet in the galaxy, there was now only debris and silence. Commander Ryan Hayes pulled himself to his feet on the Titan's bridge, blood running from a cut on his forehead. Half the control panels were dark and smoke filled the air, but his ship was still alive. Around him, his crew worked frantically to assess the damage and keep their vessel operational. "Status report," Hayes called out, his voice hoarse from breathing smoke. Lieutenant Danny Ross looked up from his damaged weapons console. "Main guns are offline, sir. We're down to secondary weapons only, but we're still here." Chief Engineer Amy Walsh's voice crackled over the communication system from the engine room. "Commander, we've got hull breaches on 12 decks and the fusion reactors are running on emergency power. This ship shouldn't be able to move, but somehow it's still holding together." Hayes looked at the main screen, which showed the remaining HFY ships. The alien fleet that had seemed so unstoppable just hours before was now in complete chaos. Without their flagship and their supreme commander, the surviving vessels were retreating in disorder. Atlas, the ship's artificial intelligence, spoke from its console. "Commander, I am detecting multiple alien vessels attempting to flee the system. Should we pursue?" Hayes thought for a moment. The Titan was barely functional and his crew was exhausted, but the alien ships that escaped would return to HFY space and report what had happened here. That might not be such a bad thing. "Negative, Atlas. Let them go. I want them to tell their people what happened here today." The surviving HFY ships limped away from Tau Ceti, their crews stunned by what they had witnessed. These aliens had conquered hundreds of worlds without ever losing a single major battle. Now their fleet was broken, their leader was dead, and it had all been done by one human ship. As news of the battle spread across the galaxy, something remarkable began to happen. On planets that had surrendered to the HFY without a fight, resistance movements began to stir. The aquatic Mertani, who had thought their species was extinct, emerged from hidden colonies and began attacking HFY supply lines. The crystalline Silkari sabotaged alien mining operations on their occupied homeworld. Even the peaceful Vorthek began building warships again. The message was simple and spread from system to system. The HFY could be beaten. If humans could do it with one ship, imagine what entire civilizations could accomplish if they worked together. On Earth, Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the command center watching reports come in from across human space. The evacuation of Tau Ceti had been completed successfully. All 2 million colonists had escaped to safety while the Titan held off the alien fleet. But the victory had come at a cost. "Admiral," her aide reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the Titan." Carter activated the communication screen and saw Commander Hayes on the bridge of his battered ship. Behind him, she could see crew members working to repair damaged systems. The man looked exhausted but victorious. "Admiral," Hayes said, "mission accomplished. The HFY fleet has been defeated, and the civilian transports have reached safety." "What's your status, Commander?" Hayes smiled grimly. "We're hurt, but we're alive. The Titan proved that human engineering can stand up to anything the galaxy can throw at us. This ship took everything they had and kept fighting. Carter nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. Return to Earth, Commander. You and your crew have earned a rest. As the Titan limped home, Admiral Carter began planning for the future. The victory at Tau Ceti had shown that humanity could defend itself, but it had also revealed something else. The galaxy was full of oppressed species who needed help, and Earth now had the technology to provide it. Within months, construction began on a new class of battleships based on the Titan's design. The shipyards that had once built simple cargo, vessels and patrol craft were retooled to create the most powerful warships in the galaxy. Each new ship incorporated lessons learned from the Titan's battle, making them even more effective against alien energy weapons. Commander Hayes was promoted to Admiral and given command of the new fleet. Chief Engineer Walsh became the head of the Super Battleship program, designing even larger and more powerful vessels. Lieutenant Ross was transferred to the Naval Academy, where he trained a new generation of officers in the tactics that had defeated the Kethvar. But the most important change was in how humanity saw itself. Before the battle at Tau Ceti, humans had been just another species trying to survive in a dangerous galaxy. Now they were something more. They were protectors, defenders of the weak and enemies of tyranny. The first test of this new role came when the Mertani sent a desperate message to Earth. Their resistance movement had liberated several colonies, but Kethvar reinforcements were on the way. Without help, the aquatic people would be wiped out completely. Admiral Hayes didn't hesitate. He took a fleet of 12 new battleships to the Mertani system and arrived just as the alien reinforcements dropped out of hyperspace. The Kethvar commanders, still traumatized by their defeat at Tau Ceti, took one look at the human fleet and immediately retreated. Word of this second victory spread even faster than the first. Soon, requests for help were pouring in from dozens of species. The Silkari asked for assistance in liberating their crystal cities. The Vorthek wanted human ships to escort their rebuilt fleet. Even species that had never heard of Earth before were sending messages asking for protection. Admiral Carter realized that humanity had accidentally become the galaxy's police force. It was a responsibility they had never asked for, but one they couldn't ignore. Too many innocent people were suffering under Kethvar rule. She stood in the observation deck of Earth's newest space station, watching human battleships patrol the outer system. Each ship represented the hopes of entire civilizations. The burden was enormous, but so was the opportunity. The communication system activated and a familiar voice filled the room. It was Admiral Hayes reporting from the front lines where his fleet was helping to liberate another Kethvar-occupied world. Admiral Carter, he said, we've just received word that the Kethvar home fleet is massing for a counterattack. They're planning to retake all the systems they've lost and destroy Earth as an example to other species. Carter smiled. Let them come. The galaxy had learned that humans didn't back down from a fight, and the Kethvar were about to learn that lesson. Again. Understood, Admiral. How many ships do they have? Intelligence reports over 200 vessels, including their newest dreadnoughts. Carter's smile grew wider. Then we'd better build more battleships. Across the galaxy, the message went out, on every frequency and in every language. This is Earth Command. Any species seeking freedom from oppression may request assistance from the Human Defense Fleet. We stand ready to help those who cannot help themselves. The age of Kethvar dominance was ending, and the age of human protection had begun, and it had all started with one ship making a stand at Tau Ceti, proving that sometimes the impossible was just another word for untested.